There is a city in the desert where everything changes the moment you cross the street. Same mountains, same climate, same language. Even the same people split only by a fence, yet on one side, children go to school without fear. On the other, mothers bury their sons far too soon. Welcome to Nogales, or more precisely, Nogales, Arizona, and Nogales, Sonora. Two halves of one city, two stories that could not be more different. One lives in the promise of the American dream, the other in the shadow of shattered hopes. Why? Why do nations that share the same land, culture, and ancestry end up with such unequal destinies? This is not just about one city, it's about two continents, and a 500-year-old wound that still bleeds across Latin America today. In the early 16th century, the New World promised unimaginable riches. To the south, Spanish explorers like Juan Diaz de Solís arrived at the Rio de la Plata, the River of Silver. The name alone foretold their mission: extract, dominate, profit. Where native societies were complex, the Spanish found an opportunity not to build, but to replace. Pedro de Mendoza founded Buenos Aires in 1534, only to abandon it when local tribes refused to trade or be subjugated. But inland, along the Paraná River, they found something else: the Guarani, sedentary, hierarchical, and agrarian. Perfect conditions for conquest. The Spanish didn't just conquer, they married into the royal families. They became the elite. They inherited the chains of power and rewrote the rules to serve themselves. It was a pattern that would stretch across Latin America like a net woven from institutions of control. From Mexico to Peru, from Colombia to Chile. The Spanish exploited existing hierarchies. They replaced emperors with conquistadors, temples with cathedrals, tribute with taxes. And over it all, they imposed a brutal system, encomienda, a grant not just of land but of people. Each conquistador was awarded whole communities to work, pay tribute, and survive just enough to be useful. In 1545, at the base of a mountain called Potosi in modern-day Bolivia, the Spanish struck silver, not vines, but entire walls of ore. Potosi would become the richest city in the world, and the largest graveyard. Over 2 centuries, millions were forced to work in suffocating tunnels, breathing mercury vapors, dying by the hundreds of thousands. The mountain became known as the mouth of hell. And yet, all this wealth flowed not to the people of the Andes, but to Spain. While Spain feasted on silver and souls in the south, England arrived late to the New World and found the table mostly empty. It was 1607 when the first English settlement at Jamestown took root. Unlike Mexico or Peru, there were no empires here, no cities of gold, no elaborate temples. The land was vast and open, but the native tribes were scattered and fiercely independent. So the English tried the Spanish playbook: dominate, enslave, extract. It failed spectacularly. Starving, abandoned, and desperate, many colonists fled Jamestown for the forest. Some joined native tribes, others simply died. The Virginia Company, which had funded the venture, pivoted. If people couldn't be forced to work, maybe they could be persuaded. So they tried something radical. They gave land to settlers. They created elected assemblies. They offered a stake not just in survival but in governance. This wasn't altruism. It was necessity. And yet it laid the foundation for something unprecedented: a culture of distributed political power, Over time, these colonial assemblies gained autonomy. By the late 1700s, they believed themselves entitled not only to land, but to self-rule. What followed was the American Revolution, a war for independence, not just from a king, but from the idea that power should reside in the few. The U.S. Constitution enshrined protections for property. More than that, it protected invention. Incentives aligned, create something new, and the law will protect your right to benefit from it. The results were explosive. Between 1820 and 1845, nearly half of all U.S. patentees came from modest or poor backgrounds. The playing field wasn't equal, but it was open. Thomas Edison, the son of a failed shingle maker, would become the most prolific inventor in human history. That was not possible under the encomienda system. Meanwhile, Latin America had its own revolution, but it looked very different. In 1808, Napoleon's armies invaded Spain, throwing the Spanish monarchy into chaos. In the Americas, colonial elites feared something worse than foreign conquest, losing control of the labor beneath them, so they declared independence not to liberate the people, but to preserve their own power. In country after country, from Mexico to Argentina to Venezuela, the old colonial elites simply shed the Spanish flag and raised their own. The institutions of exploitation remained. Political rights were not expanded. Land was not redistributed. Labor remained coerced, informal, and insecure. And with no mechanisms for peaceful political change, power became a prize to be seized by force. Between 1824 and 1867, Mexico had 52 presidents. Most came to power through violence. Most left the same way. Such instability made long-term investment all but impossible. Secure property rights, in name only, innovation, capital formation, entrepreneurship all faltered. If you invented something valuable, you had two options: lose it, or lose your life defending it. Banks, when they existed, served only the entrenched elite. In 1910, the entire country of Mexico had only 42 banks. Two of them controlled 60% of the market. Compare that to the United States, which by 1914 had over 27,000 banks lending to everyone from farmers to factory owners. The difference wasn't just in money, it was in access. And when the railroads came, the divide deepened. In the U.S., land was granted freely to settlers. In Latin America, it was claimed by oligarchs, entire provinces parceled out like spoils of war. As international trade surged during the Industrial Revolution, Latin America's elite grew wealthier on cattle, sugar, coffee, oil, but the benefits rarely trickled down. This was not the curse of geography, nor of culture. It was the legacy of institutions built to extract, not to empower. In the mid-20th century, it seemed Latin America might finally defy its past. Venezuela was booming. Oil wealth gushed from the earth. And for a moment, a brief, glittering moment, the country looked like it might rise above history. By 1950, Venezuela had the fourth highest GDP per capita in the world. It was richer than Japan, richer than most of Europe, and poised to become a leading power in the Western Hemisphere. But beneath the surface, the same old structures still stood. The wealth wasn't invested into a diversified economy or a broad middle class. It was spent and stolen. Politicians handed out oil dollars like candy in exchange for loyalty. Entire sectors became addicted to the easy flow of petro money, while agriculture and manufacturing withered. Then came nationalizations. Then came price controls. Then came hyperinflation. By the 21st century, Venezuela had become a textbook case of the resource curse. But it wasn't alone. Latin America is among the most resource-rich regions on Earth. From the lithium of Bolivia to the copper of Chile, for the coffee of Colombia to the soy of Brazil, wealth lies in the soil. Yet, generation after generation, that wealth has been siphoned off by narrow elites, where political institutions remain unaccountable, where courts are slow, corrupt, or simply absent, where monopolies dominate markets and favors are bought instead of earned. Innovación dice, risk becomes unbearable. People stop building for the future because tomorrow is uncertain or worse, predatory. And when global markets crash, as they always do, it's the poor who fall the furthest. Let us return to the Sonoran Desert, to Nogales, one people, two systems. In Nogales, Arizona, the government responds, however imperfectly, to its citizens. A mayor cannot seize your home on a whim. A police chief cannot demand tribute. A judge, in theory, is beholden to the Constitution. If someone cheats the system pushes back because those in power must answer to the vote. And so people invest. They buy homes. They open restaurants. They send their kids to college because the future feels real. In Nogales, Sonora, the laws are different, not on paper but in practice. The Constitution promises rights, but courts are slow and corrupt. Police might protect you, or they might extort you. You can start a business, but don't expect to keep it if you succeed too much. You can protest, but you might disappear. This isn't because Mexicans are lazier, or less talented, or less ambitious. It is because the institutions surrounding them do not reward effort or punish theft unless it's petty. So why do these institutions remain? Why haven't they been reformed? Because they still serve someone, the oligarch, the monopolist, the politician who buys votes with crumbs while dining in gold-trimmed estates. They are not relics of colonialism. They are its descendants. The tragedy of Latin America is not that it was colonized. It's how it was colonized. Spain sought extraction. England, by accident or design, incentivized participation. The difference was never just about who ruled, but how they ruled. And who they ruled through. Where the Spanish encountered empires, they replaced the emperors and kept the thrones. Where the English found no central hierarchies to hijack, they had to bargain with their own people. Thus began a fragile but expanding culture of rights. But in Latin America, conquest never really ended. It simply changed uniforms. Even today, the vestiges remain in the paperwork that takes months to process unless you know the right person, in the police who answer to the local strongman, in the monopoly that charges 5 times the fair price because it owns the only factory. And every year, as corruption eats away at hope, the cycle tightens. Talented young people flee not because they hate their countries, but because they know what happens when merit means nothing. They become migrants, dreamers, strangers in strange lands, and as they cross rivers, deserts, checkpoints, they often arrive in cities that look just like the ones they left, at least from a distance. But the moment they try to build something, they feel the difference